What is going on, YouTube? Andrew Miller, Shane Black from Hook'emHeadlines.com. We are coming back at y'all today with, kind of a lot of basketball talk. I think there has been a lot of Texas fans out there the last few days that have been maybe a little bit panicked and generically disappointed in the way that the roster has come together early this offseason, and rightly so to some degree. I mean, we haven't seen a single key player from last year's squad return. That does surprise me a little bit. I was expecting, maybe Tyrese Hunter to stick around, Dylan Mitchell. I was not expecting AJ Johnson to pull a LaMelo Ball and go play for the Illawarra Hawks in the NBL. But I'll start here. The players we've lost so far: Arterio Morris to the portal, Rowan Brumbaugh to the portal, who Brumbaugh committed to Georgetown earlier this week. And then no other portal. AJ Johnson decommitted, signed to the NBL's Illawarra Hawks. Dylan Mitchell declared for the NBA draft while maintaining his collegiate eligibility. Same thing with Tyrese Hunter. And then the rest of the guys that are departing are due to a lack of eligibility. We're still waiting on word from Dylan Dessou as well. So he's really the only outstanding decision we're waiting on. Granted, I guess if AJ Johnson could decommit, then we got to make sure that Ron Holland follows through and enrolls. That's an unfortunate storyline that has crept up. But it's not going to be all negative in this video, because we do have some portal movement and, guys that we're kind of looking at that could form the foundation to rebuild this roster. So anyway, Jim, what are your thoughts on the team so far this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the past 10 or so days, it's been a bit unfortunate. That said, I don't think the sky is falling. I sent out a tweet earlier today just kind of mentioning everything you said about the two guys that entered the portal, the two that have declared for the draft. AJ Johnson decommitted, and then strength and conditioning coach John Riley also left the program. And it wasn't necessarily supposed to be a shot at Rodney Terry. I just think in today's landscape of college basketball, this attrition is going to happen with every single roster. Look around the country. There really isn't a team that is sticking true. The Duke teams of the 90s that would just bring back year after year, like 95% of their scoring and win titles. That doesn't happen anymore. I do think it is a little bit worrisome that Terry and this program, they haven't landed anyone yet in the portal. Obviously, it's still a little early, but there have been a lot of commitments. So to see all the guys leave and no one come in yet, I get why that can be a little worrisome. But I think when it's all said and done, this is going to be a competent roster going into the 2023 season, and it's going to be a team that can certainly win some basketball games. But yeah, today's news of the AJ Johnson decommitment, I think that was a big one. Johnson, could have been a one and done guy, but regardless, that was someone who, no matter what happens with Tyrese Hunter, no matter what happens in the portal, Johnson was going to be a guy who's going to get a lot of backcourt minutes this year. So, and having a 5-star freshman like that with kind of the pizzazz and athleticism he plays with would have been a big draw to the Moody. I think he would have been a fun player to watch. Reported he's getting $750,000 from the NBL, so certainly hard to turn down. But yeah, I think you can certainly look at this one of two ways. I'm going to look on a more optimistic side and just say this is kind of how college basketball is right now. But I do think that if you want to be pessimistic, you can say that the first 2 weeks on the job for Terry have not been, super smooth sailing.
Yeah, I think that's my thought on it. Is I should have mentioned that at the outset of the video. I'm not pressing the panic button anytime soon. Between those three guys, I mean, obviously Brumbaugh took a red shirt, but between those three guys, you are losing less than 10 points per game, around 5 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, and half a block per game. We've said this since the beginning, though. I think Rodney Terry in his first year at the helm, right or wrong, is shooting to have a more experienced lineup. I mean, that's the experience that Texas had in the lineup this season, or this past season, is the reason why they made it to the Elite Eight. Guys like Marcus Carr, guys like Dylan Dessou, Timmy Allen, Christian Bishop, Serge Barry Rice. There were timely contributions that we got from from a guy like Arterio Morris had 2 big games in the Big 12 tournament. He had some big games coming off the bench during the regular season, a couple here and there. But, Dylan Mitchell was largely a non-factor during the regular season. Brumbaugh was a long-term developmental guy. Like, turning the page for some of these guys isn't going to be all that impactful in the grand scheme of things, I don't think. We'll see where the portal goes from here. But AJ Johnson, for the time being, I think is the biggest loss, and really the only one that I'm sweating. But even he had a lot of refinement. He was still a Chris Beard's recruit. So, hopefully Rodney Terry can get some of the guys that he was the leading recruiter on before he took over as the interim head coach. Trey Johnson, I'm looking at you mainly.
Yeah, I would say player development is certainly, I would say, a bigger factor in football. But the same thing that we're saying for Sark, I think you got to say for Rodney Terry. You got to remember, he's going into his first full season as head coach. You got to give him time to kind of build his team. It's not going to happen overnight. Obviously, in today's day and age in college basketball, you can build teams quicker. And like you mentioned, I do think Terry kind of wants to get a veteran kind of squad in here. I mean, really, if Ron Holland stays in the class, there's just going to be one freshman. But I think people should pump the brakes, give him some time, and see what happens. I also, like you mentioned, the previous team was Chris Beard built, and those guys committed to Chris Beard. Rodney Terry was the lead recruiter in some of those, but Rowan Brumbaugh, who left, was redshirted because that's what Chris Beard felt was best for him in this program. And when Beard left, his kind of connection left as well. I was looking into it. Arterio Morris, who was an unfortunate guy to enter the portal. I thought he could have had a really big sophomore season on the 40 acres with how the guard minutes were going to open up. But in 7 games under Beard, Arterio Morris averaged 17 minutes a game. And then, in the 28 or so he played with Terry as a head coach, it was only 10 minutes per game. I mean, you can say that some of those non-conference games, obviously, it's going to inflate his minute total, but it seems like he was more of a Beard guy. So I think that has to be taken into account too when asking yourself why these guys are all leaving. But it's just going to take a couple big name portal recruits to land just to quiet the fan base down. I'm sure we'll get into it. Max Abmas, top of mind, one of the leading scorers in college basketball over the past couple seasons. But yeah, I think that's all it's going to take for fans to really settle in. And once we see this roster start to shape up, I don't think there's going to be much disappointment.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we're like a Dylan Dessou announcement away and one big portal commit away from like a lot of it, like you said, a lot of this smoke going away. So I think this is a good transition point, though, to talk about the portal and some of the guys that Texas is going after right now. Let's start with some of the backcourt guys. We're going to start with guys that Texas has shown interest in, reached out, that sort of stuff, just from what we've heard in reports that are confirmed. You mentioned the first one that I wanted to talk about, Max Abmas, 2-time Summit League Player of the Year, 4-year starter Oral Roberts. Andrew Slater of The Athletic had tweeted today that Texas, verbatim, said apparently has the lead with Wichita State and Kansas State still in the mix. I've seen reports that Baylor is in a good spot with him. I don't know how much I buy into that at the moment, given that Adam Flagler still could return to Baylor next season. Kansas State and Texas, in terms of Big 12 programs that have reached out to him, I think present the best situations. But I've got to imagine that Terry and the staff are putting everything they have right now into getting Abmas. They need that sort of win in the portal.
Yeah, he's an absolutely electric scorer. I mean, he averaged, I think it was like 23 points per game over the last 3 seasons. And, that was on a lot of shot attempts, but he's still pretty efficient. I mean, he shot, 37% from 3 last year, 39% the year before, and 43% the year before that. So he's a guy who can stretch out to 30 feet, almost like a Steph Curry light. I would say I'm very tread cautiously when using that comparison, but that's kind of how he plays. And he would provide immediate spark to this backcourt. And that's a guy who, if Terry and the staff can land, that's someone who can kind of flip the script and make you forget about the losses. Because, I mean, box score numbers, you can't find anyone better. And I think he's ready. He's a Dallas kid. I think he's ready to take that, fifth year grad transfer step to a big time program. And he could come in if you potentially pair him with Tyrese Hunter in the backcourt. Bit undersized of a backcourt, but that's some firepower right there. Rankings, most of the top 15, 20 guys are already committed. Abmas is one of the few that isn't. He's currently 7th in their portal rankings. So he's kind of the big fish still out there that Texas needs to secure. And I think they're in a great position to do so.
I'm going to put it like this in terms of what Abmas can do. I think he's actually a better version of Marcus Carr on offense. He's had that sort of development as an efficient facilitator that Marcus Carr had in the last few years. If you look at Abmas's year-over-year progression in terms of his assist-to-turnover ratio, it's pretty impressive. He had 4 assists and 2 turnovers per game last season. Actually, I think he averaged 4.5 assists, 4 assists and 2 turnovers, which, given how high a usage player he was and how much he scored the basketball, that's really impressive. That's a lot of opportunities to turn over the basketball when you're averaging 4 assists per game and putting up damn near 24 points per game. He also runs the pick and roll well. Rodney Terry likes to do that. I think Texas ranked around the 75th percentile in terms of frequency of the pick and roll last season. And just speaking under Rodney Terry. And then Abmas, one of the impressive things about him is he's one of the better tough shot makers in the country. He ranked in the 95th percentile in guarded contested jumpers last season. Who did you think of last season when you thought of Texas players taking contested jumpers, at least among the guards? So I like to think of Abmas potentially as a better version of Carr on the offensive end, a more stable version as well, but maybe not as good on the defensive end. I think people sleep on the defensive impact that Marcus Carr had on Texas. Other guards that we're going after, Quincy Olivari, the transfer from Rice, is a name that sticks out because he recently included Texas in his top 4. I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't know how much Texas is putting into this recruitment. It might be a little bit more now that Reese Dixon Waters is off the market. He was someone that Texas was prioritizing. Terry visited, took a trip out to Southern California. I believe that was last week to see. Dixon Waters committed to San Diego State over UCLA and Texas, though. That happened earlier this week. So, Olivari had a really solid season at Rice. We got to see him in one game last season. He's a 6'2" guard, averaged around 19 points per game. Shot decent clip from the field and from 3, 41, 36%, around 79, 80% from the line. 2-time All-Conference USA player. I would see him as more of a combo guard. And honestly, if we have Tyrese Hunter returning next season, I think that would start to become a little bit of a crowded backcourt between him, assuming we do land Abmas. If we got a guy like Olivari, he's a high volume scorer. And maybe he was kind of efficient for Rice, but not the most efficient scorer either. So, what would be your thoughts on him?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it, if we get Abmas and Hunter to return, that's huge, and that's going to be your starting backcourt in 2023, 2024. But a lot of it's going to be convincing guys of roles that they take on this team, which Chris Beard did perfectly with Serge Ibaka Rice. He came in and was the best 6th man in the country. But if you look at it right now, Texas only has 2 scholarship players committed pretty much. Brock Cunningham and Alex Anamekwe. And then if you count Hunter and Disu in there, that's 4. And then Ron Holland would be 5. And so that's best case scenario right now. And after those 5, you need to fill out the scholarship players with hopefully another 4 or 5 transfers. So however you get it done, I think, but Rodney Terry and his staff are going to have to figure out a way to fill these holes, unless you want no shade to the walk-ons, but Cole Bott and Gavin Perriman in the rotation, which I don't think is something that Rodney Terry and the staff plans to do. So I think if I'm Texas, I don't really worry about fit here. And Olivari is someone that he included Texas in their top 4, I think you go all out, because at this point you just need numbers. You can't really be picking and choosing. So it's convincing him to where, hey, you might be a 6-man, but look what Sir'Jabari Rice just did in the 6-man role for us.
To make it work with a guy like Olivari in this rotation, you have to get him to fit the right role. Olivari can be an off-ball scorer. I mean, I think he was kind of a secondary playmaker at Rice. He played more at the 2 than he did at the 1 last season. That said, he initiated the pick and roll a lot at Rice. He was oftentimes kind of their bailout scorer. Again, took a lot of contested jumpers, a lot of spot-up shots. Something like 85% of the possessions where he was either the ball handler or the shooter, it was spot up or pick and roll. And so, I think he would fit a very specific mold at Texas, which would be an interesting fit, to say the least. A guy, I'm not saying that this is a guy Texas is going after. This is just an example to fit a mold that I would like to see Texas go get more of a guy like Keonte Kennedy. He's a journeyman. I remember watching him at Memphis last season. He's been at UTEP before. I don't remember where else he was, but he's in the portal again, looking for, I think, his 4th school now. But he's a guy that, pull up the numbers here. I remember he was solid. Yeah, scored 10 points per game, most games coming off the bench. He's from Austin, or he went to Austin Westlake. Weird. I didn't even know that. I guess that makes sense if he ended up at UTEP for a little bit, but averaged about 10 points per game, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, shot 46% from the field, 38% from deep, and averaged about 1.5 steals per game. He's 6'5", can play at the 2 or the 3. I think an excellent role player that maximizes efficiency in multiple ways. I think that would be a nice switchable guy to have that also brings a veteran voice to the locker room, well-traveled. Also, if he's at Memphis, he was under Frank Haith. Interesting. Wow, there's some connections there.
Yeah, it's a line. And
holy shit. Sorry, guys. Sorry the language. I didn't know how many connections were there. Maybe that's a guy to watch.
So I think it's interesting, and I think you mentioned this. We would never know if the staff was panicking, but I think it is a good sign if they're not panicking, because they know their relationships with these portal players.
But this portal window closes, except if you're a grad transfer, I think in like mid-May. And so, Texas, you're right, to some degree, there needs to be some urgency here to lock down some key players. I'm hoping that Abmas is the first of that group. I still can't get off that Keonte Kennedy thing. That's really funny, all those connections. Austin Westlake product also was with Frank Haith, our newest assistant coach hire at Memphis. Anyway, I have heard that we're after one more taller guard. I don't know if that's Kennedy. I think it, at least in terms of just making contact, it could be Matthew Cleveland from Florida State. I've heard that it would be a big splash. That would make sense. He's one of the taller guards or wings that's entered the portal recently, and definitely one of the better ones. Is the top priority among portal bigs. That's Kadin Shedrick, actually native of my hometown, Raleigh, North Carolina. Holly Springs, actually, I don't know if he's from Raleigh or Holly Springs specifically. Holly Springs is a suburb of Raleigh, just south of. But UVA transfer, I think he's a redshirt junior, and didn't put up huge numbers at UVA by any means. But if you watch the tape, the highlights, go through some of the finer points of his stat line at Virginia, you can find a lot of value there. He's got excellent length, some NBA type tools if he can, maybe get higher volume touches at his next stop out of the portal. He was originally set to take a visit to Texas on April 18th and then see Mizzou on April 19th. I've heard that he rescheduled, or it was reported today that he's rescheduled those for personal reasons.
I think Shedrick would be a perfect guy to add as a second big next to Disu, if possible. And he's a rim protector. They certainly wouldn't be playing together a ton, but he's got the size, 6'11", good in the pick and roll, good at rolling to the rim, kind of everything like the cliche center in today's day and age, And you made an interesting point. If he got more touches, how his offensive game could blossom. I think that's certainly something that could happen. He shows decent touch around the basket. So, yeah, this is someone who I think we have known that Terry and his staff are kind of prioritizing, and it would be a great land and someone who would be, a great addition to kick off the transfer class.
For his career, 6 blocks per game, 16 rebounds per 100 possessions. So he's a guy that kind of makes the most of any impact he can make on both ends of the floor in the paint. So there's a reason why Texas is putting a lot into recruiting some of these bigs out of the portal, prioritizing adding more length than really you ever saw Chris Beard tried to go after, because the next name, Kalib Boone, Oklahoma State transfer. I don't want to spend too much time on him because, well, we actually spent probably about 15 minutes talking about him, or at least I did during the regular season when we were talking about Oklahoma State. I think a lot of Texas fans will remember a couple of times where he did a lot of damage to the Longhorns. There have definitely been times in the last couple of seasons when Kalib Boone has been really like the only source of offense for Oklahoma State. He's a good back to the basket scorer. He can put the ball in the bucket when he's on, when he's locked in. I say that because he was an up and down player at Oklahoma State. It's very true. He was about as hot and cold as it got in the Big 12, among all Big 12 selections, may I add, this past season. He sounds like kind of a secondary option right now for Texas in the portal, but it looks like they've had multiple conversations. So, maybe if Texas loses out on Shedrick, Boone could be a guy that adds some depth and experience.
Very streaky player, but at the college level, you're going to find a lot of streaky players. That's someone I'd definitely be interested in looking to add. And honestly, I think we see a lot more interconference transfers than I think you'd originally guess. Obviously, we saw it with Tyrese Hunter, but I think that sometimes for guys transferring to a school that they've, traveled to, been to, played against is certainly a plus. I don't know if this is specific to Boone's case, but that's certainly something to watch. And he's a guy who, regardless of what happens with the rest of the portal targets, would be someone that I'd be interested in having on the Longhorn roster come next year.
Has a plethora of Big 12 experience, more than 75 games in the Big 12 under his belt. The last name among bigs that I have, because I'm trying to think, there was one other that we were going after that already committed somewhere. Can't remember. We were kicking the tires on IMAC, and Ware from Oregon.
Yeah.
But he already committed. Didn't he?
Indiana.
Yeah, that's what I thought. He's a Hoosier now. Kebba Njie is the last one. If y'all recognize that name, it's because we faced him just a month ago, roughly in the round of 32. He's a freshman, I believe a freshman big man transfer from Penn State. Limited minutes. He did start frequently at Penn State, but he was kind of in a Dylan Mitchell type role where, played about 15 minutes per game. Limited impact, average around 4 points per game. He's a guy that's improving at a high rate, though. Has a developing back to the basket game. He's got a lot of length. He can run the floor really well. I think he's developing as a rim protector as well. Good rebounder. So, he's more of a developmental guy, but, honestly, I think he could be a solid guy to have as, maybe the third big in the rotation. Maybe a guy that backs up Holland at the 4 if you want more length, or backs up, Dessou, Shedrick, whoever it is at the 5.
Yeah, I think he'd be a good addition. We've talked about Terry wanting to add veterans, which I think certainly should be a priority. I also like the idea of adding guys who have only played a year or two in college basketball. So you can bring them in and develop them. It's almost like getting a freshman and you have those years to develop them. And so I think that in that sense, that would be kind of a perfect get. So it's important to get guys who you can also develop and who are going to stay on the 40 for more than just one season. And I think he's someone that certainly applies to.
Yeah, very true. For Njie too, just to say, it sounds like he's kind of got a group of top 8 or 10 schools that he's interested in, and Texas is in that group. I know that sounds like a lot, but if you're someone that keeps up with basketball portal news and you see these lists of schools that have reached out to some of the bigger guys in the portal, usually it's a thread long worth of tweets, anywhere between 25 and 50 schools, sometimes more. Do you have any other guys that, still outstanding that you would, maybe the type of player you would like to see Texas reach out to?
So Jesse Edwards was someone that I saw 24/7 touch on, but he, in the past hour you're mentioning, he released his top three at West Virginia, Kansas, and Gonzaga. So, obviously that's not a pipe dream, but Posh Alexander, guard from St. John's, he's a guy that he's had his moments. I mean, he's pretty dang inefficient, and he's run into some turnover problems, but he's someone another where, obviously I'm switching over to guard here just to close it out, but he's someone I didn't even realize he was in the portal. I was going through the list. And he's someone that I think has a lot of potential. I've seen him play some good games. He was Big East All Freshman a couple of years ago, and I think that'd be an interesting name to throw in.
I don't really have any other portal guys I want to pinpoint. It makes my head hurt to
Yeah,
do too
there's
much
a lot
scouting college
there.
people.
Yeah, the portal is a crazy time, and I would also just throw out there, Texas is not going to sign Hunter Dickinson. And when you look at all the lists, he's up there at number one. That's just not something, because people always like to hear the big name, and Caleb Love was thrown around too. Hunter Dickinson is not a guy that will be a Texas Longhorn. So
Yeah, I think Ware was our big chance if we wanted to get like one of the premier big men.
yeah,
We'll continue to keep you covered at the site. I've had some pieces go up today. I gave our musket players in the portal our musket. I said Shedrick, Asmus, and then I named Matthew Cleveland just as the type of player that I would like to see us get. Anyway, for Andrew Miller, Shane Black at OKMheadlines.com, that's pretty much it. Welcome.
welcome.